Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Weaver. Welcome to the Audio Analyst. Pardon me. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a man whom I first met in the early 2000s during the annual Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. He has the distinction of having been a member of, or leading, the design teams for the world's first digital tape recorders at Studer in the early 1980s, the first digital multi-channel hard disk recorder, the creation of the SACD format at Sony, the world's first multi-channel DSD recorder and editor for professional recording, the Sony Sonoma workstation, and who has worked on proprietary DSD processing algorithms for converting PCM to DSD and DSD to PCM, as well as many other technologies for digital to analog conversion and clock jitter control in DACs. He has since gone on to found Playback Designs, somewhat unique products that incorporate his approaches and that use a programmable architecture, allowing Playback Designs products to be upgradable with new algorithms and technologies as they become available. I can think of no one in the industry more suited to bring us up to speed on the history and promise of digital recording. Please welcome today's guest, Andreas Koch.
Hello, everybody. As promised, this is Andreas Koch, founder of Playback Designs and a man with a long history in the development and the history of digital audio. And as I said in the intro, he's going to talk to us today a little bit about how we got to this point today. So welcome, sir. How you doing?
Very good, and thank you. It's really an honor, Greg, to be on this platform and talk with you.
Well, I'm really grateful for your time, sir. I know we all stay busy these days, so this is really really appreciated. I think you have a lot to offer this audience. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Now today we're going to go over a little bit of your history and how we got to where we are today. Can you start with maybe like your upbringing and how you got initially interested in all this in the first place?
Well, my interest always has been digital signal processing. And when I was in college, those were the classes I visited. And back then, there wasn't a whole lot of
digital. Much, was there?
It was early 80s. It was really the forefront. And I'm the forefront kind of guy. He always wants to look for new things to do and find out and just play around with. So digital signal processing was kind of, the forefront or the digital frontier, I should say.
Yeah.
So that's natural that I took that. But it wasn't clear what the application would be. And, I was driving by Studer Revox every single day on my way to college. And I just looked over to the sign and said, oh, Studer Revox, I know. And, my interest was always in audio, of course. And I played instruments, piano. So, it was kind of a natural thing. And when Willy Studer posted a big sign at college, free dinner, come on in, and there's going to be an evening with him. You can talk to him directly, and he will also show us around in the company. Of course, I went there. Free dinner. What else?
Oh, now, was this like a recruiting program? They were looking for people to hire?
It was, yeah. I didn't know that at the beginning, but that's what he was doing. And, they just started a digital audio lab. And I went in there and, there was a really very well-educated, very intelligent guy there, very young also, who was very interested in digital signal processing just like I am. So we hit it off right at the beginning. And 2 days later, I got a job offer. I wasn't even done with college yet. And so that's
now. This was what, the early '80s, like 1982ish, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think that was 80, 81 or 82, something
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted people to have a sense of when this was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And
so once you got in there, I mean, now this was like one of the first digital tape recorder projects, or I mean, you guys started doing all kinds of stuff with being able to
yeah,
record, right?
these were exciting times.
Yeah.
The CD just came out, and Studer had to buy the technology from Philips in Holland and study that. And then we started thinking about professional recorders, um, stereo, and then multi-channel.
Yeah.
And so we started with the stereo, the twin dash machine, based on an E89 mechanism. And the format was defined yet, so we joined forces with Sony to define a competing format to the existing one by Mitsubishi and Otari. So that's how the twin dash format was born, and we built that machine, and that was fairly successful. And already, while this development went on, we were thinking about a multi-channel machine. Also, in cooperation with Sony, we defined the format, and went for a 48-channel half-inch tape machine.
Oh wow.
And that was also based on the 820 mechanism, but upgraded for half-inch and multi-channel. It's a big beast.
I can imagine 20 channels.
And that took a lot of time, and actually I left kind of in the beginning of this project, and came back in 87. I joined Dolby for 3 years, and I came back to Studer in 87, and that's when this multi-channel project was in full swing already. And I was the product manager for that.
That had to be an exciting time, sir.
So, yeah, those were exciting times. And in between, I was at Dolby, also at a digital frontier, because that's when the time, that was the time when all this compression, MP3 and AC3 and whatever those names all are, that's when this all started.
Wow.
And I created the AC1 format. And while I was at Dolby, we started working on the first incarnation of AC3. Actually, I built the first real-time processor for AC3, or the early version of AC3.
Wow.
And, those were all exciting times. And then, of course, when I came back to Studer, it was yet another frontier with the multi-channel dash recorder. But already in 87, 88, it became clear that Studer, being an analog tape recorder manufacturer, would eventually lose to all this digital recording. And, I wasn't sure that digital tape recording would be the future. Or whether that would be really too expensive, because these machines, they sold for a ton of money.
I'll bet, yeah.
Too expensive, and it was prohibitive. Even Sony's machine was very expensive.
Sure.
It was a very good one too.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So there had to be a way to scale it in price and make it more available for lower-end studios. And clearly, the technology was still very limited, but there were startup companies popping up, mostly in the US, that started recording onto computers.
Right. So this is about when you started to look at a hard drive recording system, right?
Right.
Cool.
And
this was 87-ish, you said?
So yeah, I think that was 88.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
And I traveled the world there, and that was also fun to visit all these companies. And it was mostly in the US, and I interviewed them. I played with their products, and some of them were quite quirky and slow and so forth, but some of them were actually quite useful. And we decided at Studer, and I brought all this information back. We discussed it in detail, and they decided, maybe we should start betting on this technology too, because it's only going to get better, and
Sure.
tape might be on the way out, and then Studer is going to be out in the dry, being so tape heavy, or relating or relying on tape technology so much.
So the writing was already on the wall then, that it was likely to be the replacement process for magnetic tape.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we wanted to be ready, for this.
Sure.
And again, that was a frontier for me, and I was happy to be in the middle of this and spearheading that effort. So I found this company in the Bay Area that had a fairly decent 2-channel hard disk recorder based on Macintosh out there. And most of all, it had very good, talented people behind it.
Okay.
And when I did the analysis, and we did the financial analysis, blah, 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 so all looked favorable for our case. So we thought, we would just buy them out. And so we founded Studer Editech at the time. And that was like in the early 90s. I think actually in 1990, 89 or 90, something like that. And I moved over to Menlo Park to oversee this company and beef it up with more engineers and really build the next generation hard disk recorder that is worthy for the Studer name.
Okay.
And that was quite a project.
Now, was this still 2-track, or were you doing multi-track?
No. That was multi-channel. So
okay.
we built an 8-channel module, an 8-channel chassis.
Okay.
But we could scale it all the way to 32 channels.
Oh, wow.
And, it came eventually with a mixing desk to it, and still Macintosh based, and all the editing was done on the Macintosh. But there were hardware interfaces to it. And, just when we basically finished that DACs, as we called it, the company, the parent company in Switzerland, got into financial trouble and was sold a couple of times, and then finally ended up with Harman.
Oh wow!
And that was in the same conglomerate as Lexicon, and Lexicon already had a hard disk recorder that was maybe at the time a little bit more advanced, because they started earlier with the development.
Okay.
So Harman decided that they would go with the Opus, and that was the name of the hard disk recorder from Lexicon, and not so much with ours, the DACs. So our company just was basically dissolved over a short period of time, and that was it for Studer. And that was in the early 90s when economy wasn't that great, what do I do now?
Is that when you went to Sony?
That's when I went to Sony, and Sony at the time was toying around with a really weird format called DSD.
Yeah, let's go there.
So they were looking for ways to archive analog tapes, and so we need a high quality digital format that is basically equivalent or conserves the quality of analog tape.
Sure.
And PCM had all its issues already, and they were well understood. So it needed something new, something different, something better. And when you looked at the conversion process, analog to digital, already then, the first step was a conversion to delta sigma modulation. It's basically a 1-bit system, and that technology was invented already in the 40s or 50s by Philips.
Wow.
That's how old DSD really is. And they said, if we just skip the step from the step of conversion from that delta sigma modulation to PCM, it must be better because there's less processing involved. It's much more direct, it's closer to analog, and it eliminates all the nonlinear distortions that are inherent in multi-bit systems. So they did all kinds of, they built all the prototypes and first evaluation hardware and went to studios and found that it actually is true. It does sound better than any other digital system that they have had before. So this started to get some momentum. At the same time, this format war between DVD audio and something else started. And that something else was, of course, Sony and Philips, who were afraid of losing out against DVD audio because both of them didn't have a whole lot of licensing revenue through DVD audio.
Right.
And they felt like, we need to have, something or a piece of the pie also,
Sure.
but a bigger piece of the pie. And since the CD royalties or the patents started to run out around that time too, that was the moment. That was the incentive for both Sony.
Yeah,
and
that would have been a serious motivation to do something.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing this was the early 90s, 91, 92-ish?
That was, somewhere, no, actually that was closer to the mid-90s.
Oh, the mid-90s, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
I...
You ended up you were developing DS or SACD, basically, I guess. Is that part of what was going on?
Well, yeah, initially I was involved in the format definition again of SACD and DSD, and I traveled back and forth between Sony and Philips and all these standardization committees, the RIAA, to present ideas and also listen to them and see what kind of requests they would have for a new format, so that we can answer that and hopefully beat out DVD audio.
Which I still have some, by the way. I do have a few. They had some merit. So.
And of course, it's not a bad system.
Yeah.
But that was again a digital frontier. A new format, something better. It was multi-channel and stereo. It had to have copy protection and all these wonderful things. And everything got a solution from either us at Sony or Philips. And it was really exciting to see how all these different technologies were merging in a pot, and say, we need copy protection. There was a solution from Philips. We need to have backwards compatibility to all the existing CD players. And we created this hybrid idea, and there were all kinds of difficulties with that. But both Sony and Philips threw in technologies into that pot. And it was really fun to see how we could create a team between Holland and Japan and us in the US. And then later on, we joined also forces with the Sony team in Oxford.
How did you guys settle on this? I mean, with that many cooks in the pot, how did you come down? I mean, it couldn't have been easy to come to a set of standards that everybody agreed upon, was it, or was it?
No, it was. We had to. Among ourselves, there were all kinds of discussions, but that was easy to get any agreement because it's mostly technology. But once we went out to standardization committees, copy protection committee, CT, whatever, I forgot the name, and the RIAA, that's when it became also political.
Sure.
And they were swayed, of course, by the DVD audio camp in a direction, and so we had to come in and convince them of other things and other facts, and then recording studios or recording engineers started to demand certain features.
Were they looking for like proof of concept, or were they looking for?
Of course, yeah. Proof of concept was always critical. And that's when Sony basically told me, you have hard disk recording or hard disk technology experience, you should develop a DSD or SACD recorder.
Sure.
And, we should have it next year, including converters. And
so you just reach in your back pocket and pull it out and make it work, huh?
That's right. Well, and the back pocket, I told them, the back pocket better be full. No, not a problem. Not a problem. I had a really, really great budget. It was really not an issue. Money was flowing very well. I built a team in very short time in San Francisco, which is a great place, with a lot of resources and audio engineers. So I called up pretty much every known name in the industry, and they were all excited to join the team. We had something like 18 or 20 people eventually, mostly engineers, and it was exciting. Again, a digital frontier.
Yeah.
And that was attractive to a lot of people to be involved in something new where they have a chance to develop something from scratch again.
Well, how did everybody settle on the SACD standard? I mean, was it fairly easy to get that acceptance once you came down with it?
Well, it's like you can win a tennis game by just being good and being better than the adversary and just play tactics, or you can just wait until your adversary makes mistakes. Right?
That's funny.
So you just play, very straight and all correct, but you're not aggressive. You don't really have the best tactics, but you win anyway because your adversary makes mistakes. And our adversary in this case was DVD audio, and they just collapsed. They had to give up in the end for various reasons. But that was basically the victory for SACD. However, it was at the time when it was already pretty much clear that packaged media will not be the future.
Right.
Napster already started in the late 80s. The SACD format was basically established and available in the early 2000s. So download and the notion of music should be free through the internet, that was already out in the market, and it was hard to compete with that.
Not bad.
Already people started doubting that DSD as a format at 64 fs or 2.8 megahertz may not be enough. When it was designed in the early 90s, that was the technology that was available at the time.
Right.
But 10 years later, technology moved on and made it possible to up the sample rate and not be so close to the 20 kilohertz, line where our hearing supposedly, is the threshold. Yes. So, already we started seeing that there's some technical limitations, and also the concept of packaged media is maybe not as the future for that is not as bright as we thought it would be.
So you're talking about quad DSD at this point? Is that the enhancement?
Now it is quad DSD, but what we really wanted to have was double DSD.
Oh, okay.
And we can talk about that. I mean, that's a subject itself. The merit of quad DSD versus double.
Well, I definitely want to have you back to talk about quad DSD. We're gonna talk about that the next time I have you on. But you continue with where you want to go. I was just asking if that's where we were headed. So
yeah, we'll do that eventually.
Yeah.
So at the time in the early 2000s, it was clear that maybe SACD would not be the replacement for CD and be as successful as the CD.
Well, it did start slowly. There was people by that point had gotten so tired of all the different format wars over the years that I think the only certain people who, the early adopters who were really into checking this technology out got it. So I can see where that would have been a consideration.
It was, and there was maybe also there was a disagreement, a basic disagreement between Philips and Sony. Philips thought the real future, the real advantage of SACD is its capability for multi-channel tracks, whereas Sony insisted that it should only be stereo. And we did both, but the cost of mastering increased tremendously when we had to master for multi-channel and for stereo at the same time. And these are different masters. You can't just master for multi-channel and then derive the stereo material. These are two different separate masters.
Well, I'm sure that's what caused some of the expense in the dual layer discs that were released in those days.
Exactly. And on top of that, we also had the dual layer, the regular CD master that had to be created. So instead of just one master, as up to then, we had to create 3 masters. And that's just an expense that was problematic.
I bet.
And that is, in my opinion, one of the points why SACD was not so successful, at least not in the beginning.
Initially, right?
Yeah.
So when you guys were able to increase the sampling rate and get double DSD, there had to be some inherent advantages that you guys found. What was it about double DSD, and at some point you pushed it to quad DSD? So how did that all make sense to you guys? What was going on?
Yeah, the push for, or the technical capability for double DSD did not arrive until later in the 2000s, maybe 2005 or 6.
Sure.
Some of the chips were able to do it a little earlier, but SACD was still a new format that we tried to launch, and SACD cannot do 128 or double DSD. So it was a kind of a big no to do DSD, because we wanted to promote SACD,
sure,
which can only do single. So that was kind of the problem with SACD, and then Sony realized, these are all the drawbacks of SACD. It's maybe not the right time anymore. It didn't get accepted in the market as they were planning to.
Right.
And so, it became a little bit problematic, and Sony decided to basically pull the plug of the whole project.
Wow.
And from one day to another, we were basically out in the street and looking for jobs.
Wow. So now, when was this?
That was in 2003.
Okay.
And, I looked around and did a few consulting jobs, and did something for Sony also still at that time. But I started to realize, now is the time to not think about SACD so much anymore, but the merits of DSD. And so we didn't have that limitation anymore with the physical media. We could do anything we wanted. So I played with multi-bit DSD and also higher sample rates. So I extended in both directions, sample rate and number of bits. And started to realize, there's really some advantage to raising the sample rate, certainly. And if we can not look at packaged media anymore, and the market already was kind of looking at ways to
Moving
download,
that direction, yeah.
right? So then all of a sudden, yeah, great, we have the advantage of double DSD, and downloads really don't care that much. The bandwidth is basically there. Yes, it takes a little bit more storage,
Yeah.
but it was all within technical feasibility.
Right, and drive space is cheap anymore. I mean, it was getting cheap then, and it's really cheap
It
now.
was,
So
yeah, there
size
was
of
no.
the files isn't that crucial anymore.
That's right. Unless you had a phone modem, you could do it.
Let's hope you weren't doing that by that point. Goodness.
I still was. I live a little bit out in the country, and so I still had a modem. But probably in 2001, I switched to DSL. But anyway, the time was ready for higher sample rates.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to play with different ideas on converters. And in 2007, I took all this technology that I had in my head and learned from building the Sonoma workstation, the DSD recorder, and started building my own consumer equipment.
Wow.
And the learning experience with the Sonoma workstation was, I knew how to do hard disk recording and putting all the bits on hard disk, but all the processing, the crossfades and gains, simple operations, they're really trivial in PCM, but they had to be reinvented for DSD. And
you're talking about when you founded Playback Designs, correct?
And actually, that was before when we built the Sonoma workstations.
Well, yeah, but when you said in 2007 you started your own stuff, is that what we're talking about?
That was Playback Designs. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now you've done a lot of proprietary DSD work on like the processing algorithms and doing PCM conversion to DSD and DSD conversion to PCM. Can you talk about some of that work for a little bit?
And yes, that was all basically developed for the Sonoma workstation, where trivial operations, trivial in PCM, became not so trivial in DSD. And really what we had to be careful with is that we don't do any side steps to PCM, do the processing there and then go back to DSD, which would have been probably relatively easy to do, because we wanted to demonstrate the superiority of DSD. So whatever we want to do in processing, we had to make sure that we stayed in the DSD domain.
Sure.
And so we did that religiously. And all the technology that was behind it, we had to develop from scratch with the help of Sony and all the resources that we had around the world within our own company. But all this technology was then later on available to me by Sony, and said, well, great, so we can do converters. I will do my own converter because all the existing chipsets that were out in the market were really not adequate. They all converted DSD to PCM or took PCM and converted that to DSD. So they were really not doing true DSD conversions. It was always kind of taken from somewhere else, or mostly PCM. So it was important for me, to create converters that go either from analog directly to DSD with no intermediate step, and same again on the way back from DSD to analog, because that's where really the merit is in DSD. It is so much closer to analog that we don't want to mess that up and go to PCM, because that's easier to do and there's available chips or technologies or algorithms, whatever. We really had to be careful that we convert everything directly to analog or from analog to DSD.
Well, it makes sense. You would have skipped the whole point of why you were doing DSD if you switched to PCM first.
And And we discovered that, if you really do this religiously and stay in the DSD domain for all processing and go directly to analog or from analog, then you realize DSD sounds so much closer to analog than most of the digital systems.
No question.
That was amazing. Every time I did listening sessions with recording engineers, they could point it out within the first 5 seconds. I didn't do this myself, all these listening tests, because I would be too biased.
Of course, yeah.
Too involved, emotionally also in all this technology.
Sure.
But we had enough contacts in the industry with recording engineers that added credibility to the whole thing. And I was myself very, very skeptical at the beginning, when Sony contacted me about DSD technology. And first of all, I had to say, what is DSD? Can you explain that to me? And I didn't get it. I got all this Japanese, English.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to admit, I didn't get it. Why would you do that? After a few listening tests and comparisons, and also statements from really high-end recording engineers that I respected quite a bit, who said, this sounds so much better, and I always wanted to record in analog and never digital because it was just not good enough.
Right.
That's when they said, now I can record in digital. Now I'm ready to record in digital.
Well, that's a fascinating thing to be able to accomplish, sir.
Yeah. And, it was mostly those recording engineers that convinced me that, there must be something to DSD.
Yeah.
Why it sounds so good. And I started to investigate this, and I started over a long period of time. I studied the mechanics of our hearing, the psychology also, the brain that works behind the ears.
Psychoacoustics is an interesting part of this
stuff. Exactly. Yeah. And why are we hearing even to begin with, and all of that, all these questions, they are important to ask so that you understand why or what is the process of hearing, and why are we hearing so well, so accurately. And that kind of when you merge these things together, then you understand how audio needs to be in order to please us and not be disturbing with distortions and all kinds of effects, like those digital effects that we always talk about.
Yeah, those artifacts can be really annoying.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are all understandings that contributed to my developments.
Well, listen, I think this might be a good place to wrap up for this week.
Absolutely.
Let's put this to bed. Now, you had shared with me that you have a meeting with Mobile Fidelity tomorrow to work out some things with their archiving processes. And you have also been kind enough to agree to come back and talk about that and the advantages that Quad DSD offer us for doing things like mastering vinyl and things like that, correct?
Absolutely, yes. And I'd be happy to share that with you. That will be an honor.
I'm very excited to share that with people, Andreas. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Greg, for the opportunity, and we'll talk to you next time.
Very soon, sir. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so very much for your time today, Andreas. Now, as you hopefully picked up on in our closing moments, Andreas is consulting with Mobile Fidelity on their use of his A to D and D to A processors for their internal archiving process, and has agreed to appear here again soon to update us on both that plan and to discuss the benefits of archiving aging analog tape libraries using Quad DSD, as well as to outline the advantages that such archived masters will afford for the future of mastering and cutting LPs. And by way of updates, the flagship Valve Amplification Company's statement system, which includes the 2-box statement phono stage, the 2-box statement line stage, and a pair of the 230-pound Statement 452 IQ music block mono amplifiers has arrived and is in play here. Now, to go along with that VAC stack, Masterbuilt has sent an entire loom of ultra cables, including balanced interconnects, bi-wired speaker cables, and power cords. I'll be sharing my thoughts and some recordings with this stunning system very soon. I'm also headed to GTT Audio in early October to get a taste of the True Life audio products new to the United States market from Greece. Now, the Supreme series of electronics includes the SSP1 line stage, a pure Class A transformer-coupled single-ended circuit built around new old stock 6J5 tubes with a new old stock GZ32 tube rectified power supply, and the SSA350 hybrid monoblock amplifiers that also use new old stock GZ32 rectification and a new old stock 6J5 single-ended input stage to drive an ultralinear solid-state stage and solid-state current amplifier, each with its own separate linear power supply. And those products will arrive here at the Audio Analyst later in the year for an evaluation in my system here. Now, I heard prototypes of these gorgeous products when I visited Louis Desjardins at Kronos in Montreal last April. And I'll also have my listening report on the exceptional Ideon Absolute Stream, as well as my extended listening experiences with the Alsavox Botticelli X at Rhapsody in Brooklyn recently. So be sure to subscribe so as not to miss any of these upcoming treats. Thank you for taking the time to drop by today. Please click the subscribe and notify buttons if you haven't already. Be sure to share your questions and comments. And please don't forget to like and to share links to your favorite episodes with your friends or on social media. Further information on supporting the channel may be found in today's description section or at my website, theaudioanalyst.com. Please stay safe and keep the music playing. Till next time, cheers.